The Life Story of Khentrul Rinpoche Jamphel Lodrö. Khentrul Rinpoche is considered to be the third incarnation of the great Kalachakra adept Nawang Chosen Gyatso. From his humble beginnings as a nomadic Yak Herder, Rinpoche's life has exposed him to some truly extraordinary experiences. The following timeline highlights some of the key events which have helped shape the person he is today. Signs of a coming incarnation. Before Rinpoche was born, his parents both received auspicious signs that a very special being would soon be born into the family. On one occasion, Rinpoche's father went to visit a highly realized yogini named Tara Lamo, who was considered to be an emanation of the great Yeshe Sogyal. Before he could reach the village, Tare Lamo suddenly appeared before him. Rinpoche's father prostrated and offered a blessing scarf to her. Accepting his pure offering, she bestowed upon him precious gifts such as medicine pills, protection cords, and a letter rolled into a scroll. When he arrived home, he opened the letter to find that it contained various predictions. It stated that Rinpoche's father would not live a very long life, but would be reborn as a great tantric practitioner in northern Tibet. It also stated that Rinpoche's mother was a great being who had experienced a hard life, but had the seeds for many great beings to be born to her. However, the conditions were such that only one of those beings would become highly realized, with that occurring when he was in middle age. On another occasion, Rinpoche's mother had a vivid dream about her beloved master, Yak Herder, who had been imprisoned during the Cultural Revolution. In her dream, he wore a white robe and was riding on a white horse as he approached her tent. She was surprised at his appearance, since he had always worn the traditional maroon robes of a monk. He stopped at the threshold of her tent, tied up his horse, and entered. She noticed that Yak Khentrul still had his monk's robes with him, but carried them in his bag. He sat down on a white cushion and was presented a mandala offering by people she didn't recognize. At the end of the ceremony, Rinpoche's mother left the tent and noticed that the white horse was gone. When she awoke, she had the clear feeling that she would soon see her master again. She would later learn from her husband that he had also had the exact same dream in which he and Yak Khentrul's brother, Getsi Varu, had made a mandala offering to the white-clad teacher. Astonished by this amazing coincidence, the two mentioned the dream to their friends. When word reached Getsi Varu, he confirmed that he had also had the same dream on the same night. These and other signs clearly marked the coming of a very special reincarnation. An auspicious birth. Rinpoche was born on the 18th of April, 1968, in the year of the Earth Monkey in Dera Valley beside the Machu River. On the day he was born, villagers reported that the weather was unusually mild and lotus snowflakes fell gently from the sky. His mother's waters did not break during her labour, and he was born within a fully intact amniotic sac. This is a very rare occurrence that happens only once in every 80,000 births. The attendants were also surprised to see that his umbilical cord was not attached to the placenta. It is said that he did not cry like many newborn babies, but instead smiled at his mother and her attendants. A number of children from the village said that they saw a rainbow appear over the family tent while his mother was in labour. On the fourth day after Rinpoche's birth, a stranger arrived at their family tent. He was welcomed in the usual manner and invited inside. When he removed his long coat, everyone present saw that he was dressed in the traditional red robes of a monk. The stranger asked whether he could visit the mother and the child in the birthing tent. Rinpoche's father granted him permission, but only because he was a monk. On entering the birthing tent, the monk bowed to Rinpoche's mother and began to chant blessings. He then came closer and sprinkled blessed water on the baby's body. After this, he left as suddenly as he had arrived. Nobody had a chance to ask who he was or where he had come from. A few days later, another visitor known as Kyangya made a dangerous journey across a frozen river to visit Rinpoche and offer his blessings. At that time, he told Rinpoche's mother that he believed Getsi Khentrul had indeed passed away and had now become reborn as her child. He performed a ceremony to protect the family and the baby, and then recited the epic tale of Gesa of Ling in honour of the occasion. Secretly recognised as Getsi Khentrul. As a young child, Rinpoche continued to demonstrate unique traits. When he was only 1 year old, Rinpoche is said to have recited the mantra of Manjushri as his first words. After learning to walk, he would make his way into open spaces where he recited mantras underneath the many prayer flags that fluttered in the wind. Once when he was 3 years old, Rinpoche saw some mala beads on his mother's altar and proclaimed, "Hey, these are mine." To which his mother responded, "Yes, but you gave them to me." As though remembering, he said, "Oh yes," and placed the mala back on the altar. When Rinpoche was 5 years old, his family visited a famous master in the region known as Gyalrong Samdrup. Rinpoche's mother spent time with this lama to overcome a sickness that she was experiencing. At that time, Gyalrong Samdrup had a number of dreams regarding Getsi Khentrul, confirming Rinpoche to be his immediate reincarnation. He also made a number of predictions that Rinpoche would have a long life and in the future he would become a great Dharma teacher, bringing incredible benefit to countless sentient beings. During these early years, many of the lamas that Rinpoche's parents had visited warned them to keep Rinpoche's status a secret. They had cautioned that if he had been publicly recognized as a reincarnated lama, he would experience great hardship and obstacles to his life. Following this advice, Rinpoche was raised as an ordinary child within the nomadic community, the simple life of a Yak Herder. At the age of 8, Rinpoche was responsible for herding the family's yaks. Accompanying his father, they would spend long days in the mountains, watching over the animals. One day, a pack of wolves attacked the herd and killed 8 of the yaks. With great devotion, Rinpoche prayed to the manifestation of Tara, known as Marichi, and the wolves soon left. From that day forward, whenever he was herding the yaks, he would pray to Marichi by reciting her mantra. After that, taking care of the animals was easy, and they were never under threat again. One beautiful day, Rinpoche was herding the animals on the mountain. Fragrant flowers were abundant, the fresh green grass was lush, and a peaceful ambience pervaded the countryside. As he lay on the ground, the beauty of the place reminded him of the story of a famous Indian prince named Drimed Kundun. The prince was renowned for his generosity and compassion. Remembering his great charity and sacrifice, Rinpoche fell asleep. While sleeping, he could hear beautiful music and woke suddenly. Gazing into the sky, he saw Prince Drimed Kundun with his wife and children dancing in the clouds. The prince was wearing a beautiful white flowing gown and had a perfectly formed top knot, just like an Indian prince. The princess had long black radiant hair and wore a finely woven silk dress encrusted with jewels, draped with a finely embroidered shawl. Their two sons wore brightly coloured Indian silk garments. They all moved dreamily in the clouds, yet Rinpoche was experiencing this vision while wide awake. For the next few hours he entered a deep and clear state of meditation, unlike anything he had experienced previously. When Rinpoche was a little older, he began to study Buddhism with a monk who was staying with his family. During a teaching on Medicine Buddha, Rinpoche would often correct the monk on various mispronunciations he was making. He also demonstrated knowledge of many difficult subjects that he had not been taught in that life. Word quickly spread regarding Rinpoche's natural familiarity with the Dharma. His death and taking ordination. After many years of prohibition, the Tibetans were eventually allowed to begin rebuilding their monasteries. Rinpoche's father volunteered to help in the reconstruction of Denang Monastery and travelled a great distance to contribute what he could. Some time passed, and Rinpoche decided to join his father. When Rinpoche finally arrived, he found that his father was quite ill. His condition soon deteriorated, and everyone feared that he would die. Soon after this, Rinpoche's mother arrived, saying that she had seen a number of inauspicious signs. Unfortunately, she was not allowed to stay with her husband due to the regulations at the monastery. One morning, Rinpoche's father asked him to prepare a seat so that he could sit in a meditation posture. He was frail but could walk with assistance, so Rinpoche helped him to his seat, where he appeared to be very comfortable. After a little while, his father said, "Everything is white," and gestured in front of him. He said it again and then slumped forward slightly. 15 minutes later, Rinpoche realised his father had passed away when a monk entered the room and told him that he should just leave the body to rest quietly. Prior to his father's death, Rinpoche was uncertain about whether to become a monk. After his father's death, however, he felt that there was now no choice left for him. He felt that if he did not become a monk, his mother would die of a broken heart. With his father's death as the catalyst, Rinpoche knelt down, bowed to his father's body, and promised to become a monk in order to fulfill his parents' lifelong wishes. After completing the period of mourning for his father, Rinpoche received a number of auspicious signs in a dream that indicated it was time for him to become a monk. When he was 17, Rinpoche travelled to Denang Monastery and requested Lama Tulku Khatag to bestow ordination on him. At that time, 15 other monks were waiting for ordination. The Lama saw the timing of Rinpoche's request as auspicious, since it meant that 16 monks would be ordained, matching the 16 arhats who were the main disciples of the Buddha. The ceremony was given the following day. Rinpoche and the other aspirants were ordained in small groups of only 3 monks at a time. During the ordination ceremony, as was the custom, each person drew a name from a hat. To Rinpoche's surprise, he drew the name of Lama Tulku Khatag's teacher, Amdo Geshe, who was also known as Jamphel Lodrö. Tulku Khatag informed Rinpoche that his ordination name would now be Jamphel Lodrö, a name that was both auspicious and precious. Learning how to be a monk. Eager to begin his training as a monk, Rinpoche approached his vow preceptor and requested teachings on the complete set of 240 vows. that are presented in the Buddhist monastic discipline, Vinaya. Greatly pleased by Rinpoche's pure intention, Tulku Khatag proceeded to give Rinpoche and a handful of the monks 4 days of teachings on the vows. He praised Rinpoche for being so perceptive and said it was significant that he had asked for this teaching to be given, offering him a handwritten set of the 36 vows with additional commentary. After returning home briefly to perform rituals for his recently deceased brother, Rinpoche travelled to Dartung Monastery to continue his studies. Unlike the smaller monasteries that Rinpoche had done retreat in previously, Dartung was a large monastic community with a few hundred monks staying there. In Dartung, Rinpoche received teachings on Nagari Punchen's book, Ascertaining the Three Vows, which presented a detailed commentary on the monastic vows and commitments, as well as those of the bodhisattva and tantric vehicles. Most of his days were spent in long sessions of chanting prayers. When teachings were given, they would usually consist of the teacher reading from a text with little explanation, if any. The students would then be expected to memorize the text during the evening. The following days they would be tested to see if they had integrated the material. Since Rinpoche had studied many of these materials with Lama Tulku Khatag, he would often teach his roommates during the night. Life in Dartung proved to be quite challenging for Rinpoche. While most of the monks had taken ordination as children, Rinpoche had become a monk as a young adult. This fact, combined with Rinpoche's natural proficiency in the Dharma, soon generated tensions with some of his superiors, who felt threatened by Rinpoche's presence. While Rinpoche only wished to focus on his studies, he often found himself being dragged into the internal politics of the monastery. Dedicating himself to study. After taking some time to visit his younger brother in Kirti Monastery, Rinpoche returned to Dartung for winter retreat. During that time, he engaged in the preliminary practices of the great Nyingma Turton known as Lama Namcho Mingya Dorje. This cycle was mainly propagated within the Palyul tradition and was called Buddhahood in the palm of your hand. It is used primarily as preparation for practicing Dzogchen. Feeling great devotion towards the treasure revealer Mingya Dorje, Rinpoche made a special effort to receive the complete transmission of the teachings, and then dedicated himself day and night to completing the practices. This included rising early in the morning to complete 1,000 prostrations before breakfast. Through great diligence, he completed 100,000 prostrations over the span of just 21 days. Over the coming months, he would continue to meditate intensively on the remaining preliminaries of cultivating bodhicitta, vajrasattva purification, mandala offerings, and guru yoga. After completing the preliminaries, he then meditated for 1 month on the syllable A, in accordance with the tradition. The following spring, Rinpoche received many teachings from the very knowledgeable Lama Khenpo Zitan, who had taken up temporary residence at Dartung. Rinpoche was very inspired by the clear and structured way the Khenpo presented the Dharma. From that moment, he considered the Khenpo to be his teacher. After many months of diligent study and practice, Rinpoche found himself filling in for a fellow monk who had been asked to recite teachings on Patrul Rinpoche's Words of My Perfect Teacher. Even though he had only been ordained for 1 year, Rinpoche recited the complete text from memory without making a single mistake. This act earned him the respect of many of his peers in the monastery. Rinpoche went on to train in the completion stage practices of working with the subtle channels and winds in order to control what is known as inner fire, tumo. Within the bitter cold of the Tibetan winter, they meditated outside with very little clothing to protect them. While most of the students could not endure the harsh conditions, Rinpoche and 3 other monks completed a 1-month retreat. While this was not enough time to master the practice, it did help Rinpoche to build his resilience and strength of mind. Over the coming years, Rinpoche received more teachings from Khenpo Ziton. This included extensive teachings on the Bodhisattva's way of life by Shantideva. Following his example, Rinpoche developed an overwhelming feeling of renunciation and faith in the teachings of Atisha and the great Kadampa Geshis. Based on this feeling, when the conditions arose, Rinpoche went on to receive a full ordination from Khenpo Ziton. Meeting his root guru. After many years of working with obstacles arising out of the internal politics of the monastery, Rinpoche made the decision that it was time to leave Dartung. On the final night there, Rinpoche had a dream in which he encountered a huge dark river with steep overhanging cliffs. Making his way one step at a time, Rinpoche successfully crossed the river and climbed the massive rock walls. Having reached the other side, he saw a beautiful valley adorned with Buddhas, forests, and streams with crystal clear water. There was a lady there wearing light blue robes, riding a white horse. She pointed towards a beautiful cave, singing in a language that Rinpoche could not understand, but nevertheless interpreted as, "Now all your difficulties and obstacles have come to an end. You must now do the Kalachakra practice there in that cave, and while you are there I will protect you, and so will many others like me." Waking from his dream, Rinpoche had a strong determination to do a 3-year tantric retreat. Setting out from the Dartung, Rinpoche returned home before travelling to Jamphel Monastery, where one of his close teachers, Tulku Lobsang Norbu, had been trained. There he spent a few months in retreat with the monks. Rested and filled with inspiration, he continued on his journey, travelling to Say Monastery in Amdo Nawa. It was there that Rinpoche expressed his desire to learn more about the Zhentong philosophy of the Jonang tradition. He asked the resident Lama who he should request these teachings from, and the Lama pointed him to seek out the highly accomplished scholar practitioner Jetsun Lama Lobsang Trinley. Upon hearing his name, Rinpoche was filled with great devotion. He was then directed to make his way to Chutang Monastery, where Lama Lutren was getting ready to give teachings on Zhentong. After many days of travel, Rinpoche eventually arrived at Chutang Monastery on a day when the monks were taking a break from the teachings in order to celebrate. Eager to meet the Lama, Rinpoche made his way before the teacher, where he offered 3 prostrations. The unassuming Lama exuded the power of realization, and when he saw Rinpoche, he motioned for him to come closer, even preparing a place for him using one of the cushions from his own seat. Feeling extremely humbled, Rinpoche sat with Lama Lutren, discussing the Dharma. At that time, Lama asked Rinpoche many questions about his practice and experience. Following the teachings at Chutang, Rinpoche accompanied Lama Lutren to the famed Zamtang Sangwa Monastery, where Lama Lutren had been requested to teach on Zhentong by the great abbot Lama Yonten Zangpo. Zamtang was home to over 2,000 monks and was the main centre for the Jonang tradition. It was here, at the request of Rinpoche, that Lama Lutren refuted all criticisms of Zhenton Madhyamika, presented in Thukten Lobsang Chuki Nyma's book, The Crystal Mirror of Philosophical Systems. From this point forward, Rinpoche developed an unwavering faith in the Jonang teachings. Practicing a 3-year retreat. When Rinpoche was 23, he was fortunate enough to gather all of the conditions necessary to enter into a 3-year retreat at Chutang Monastery on the Kalachakra completion stage. As is customary in the Jonang tradition, every monk is expected to do at least one 3-year retreat. At this time, 11 monks, most of whom were between the ages of 9 and 18, would take part in the retreat. Rinpoche and one other monk were the only adult monks in the group. Recognizing that the very young monks would struggle without help, Rinpoche took on the responsibility to tutor them throughout the retreat. Together, the monks engaged in the preliminary practices as presented in Jetsun Taranatha's text, The Divine Ladder. In parallel to these practices, Rinpoche also attended intensive study sessions with the scholarly monks. During this period, Lama Lobsang Trinli gave an extremely potent Kalachakra empowerment, in which Rinpoche felt as though his entire experience was transformed into the Kalachakra mandala of 636 deities. It's customary during such ceremonies for the teacher to bestow each participant with a Vajra name. To do this, Lama Lutren requested Rinpoche to compose a list of names and then put those names into a hat. When it was Rinpoche's turn, he drew the name Choyang Yeshi Dorji, meaning indestructible primordial wisdom. After completing the common and uncommon preliminaries, Rinpoche entered into the unique Kalachakra meditation practice known as the 3 isolations. This practice is conducted in a completely dark room where practitioners hold a specific yogic posture while meditating on the space-like nature of the mind. While Rinpoche struggled with the physical posture, through great perseverance, he was eventually able to sit without pain for sessions of 2 to 3 hours. When it came time to engage in the main practices of the 6 Vajra Yogas, Lama Lutren chose Rinpoche to be his teaching assistant. Lama Lutren would teach for 2 hours, once every 3 to 4 weeks. During the rest of this time, it was Rinpoche's responsibility to clarify the teachings for 2 of the meditation groups meditating at that time. In addition to an intensive meditation schedule, Rinpoche would often forego breakfast in order to continue meditating or to participate in study sessions that were being held at that time. At the age of 26, Rinpoche completed his retreat, and the whole group went before Lama Lutren to offer the merits of their practice. At that time, Rinpoche promised his Lama to spend at least 9 months in intensive solitary retreat in a remote area. Lama Lutren was very pleased by all of their efforts and blessed them to be successful in their practice. Following this, they had a great sok feast to celebrate their accomplishments. Becoming a Rime master. Following the 3-year retreat, Rinpoche began to wander from monastery to monastery, participating in a wide variety of teachings and retreats. With an unquenchable thirst for the Dharma, he did not limit himself to any single tradition, but instead focused on learning many of the teachings from the major schools. In order to improve the flexibility of his mind, he would often engage in debates with the local scholars of each monastery, taking the position of another tradition in order to challenge the monks to think beyond any narrow views they may have developed. For instance, when Rinpoche found himself in a Gelug monastery, he would often argue on behalf of the Nyingma tradition. whereas when he found himself in a Nyingma monastery, he would often argue on behalf of the Gelug. He found that this process not only sharpened his own understanding of the Dharma, but it also helped dispel a large number of misconceptions that come from people only focusing on the faults of other traditions. Instead, he chose to emphasize the importance of recognizing the incredible value that each unique lineage offers. It was during this period that Rinpoche visited the great monastery of Larong Choja, founded by the Rime master Khenpo Jigme Punsuk. This massive monastery was home to a thriving community built on the principle of open exchange. At this monastery, there was no set curriculum that monks had to follow. Instead, scholars were free to participate in a variety of classes and debating sessions, drawing from all of the traditions. Rinpoche greatly enjoyed this open approach to the Dharma, and it was in this environment that he thrived. Not only did his time at Larongga help Rinpoche to integrate the ocean of teachings that he had received up to that point, but it also became clear to others that Rinpoche was a true Rime master. While Rinpoche was a little reluctant to accept this sort of acknowledgement, he eventually became more comfortable with the idea that he had grown into an accomplished scholar practitioner. In addition to a growing sense of confidence in his capacity, Rinpoche's devotion toward his omniscient master, Lama Lobsang Trinley, also grew. By developing an extremely broad and vast view, he was able to see the amazingly profound nature of the teachings he had received from Lama Lutrin. A sense of overwhelming gratitude and appreciation arose within him for the immeasurable kindness that his Lama had shown him. Publicly recognized as Nawang Chosen Gyatso. After more than 2 years visiting monasteries and supporting the people in his home village, Rinpoche finally returned to Chutong to be with his root Lama. At this time, Rinpoche began to learn more about the astrological systems of Tibet, namely the Naxi system, which emerged from China, and the Katsi system, which came from India. The latter was largely based on the very precise calculations found in the Kalachakra Tantra. At this time, the entire monastery gathered for a sock ritual. While everyone was chanting, Lama Lobsang Trinley entered the hall and asked the chanting master to stop. He then proceeded to give a short Dharma teaching regarding the importance of distinguishing authentic Dharma practice and authentic Dharma teachers. As part of this talk, he publicly praised Rinpoche by name for his many years of diligent study and practice, and particularly for his non-sectarian approach. From the time that restrictions were lifted on spiritual practice, Lama Lutrin had bestowed the title of Khenpo to 12 of his students. On that day of the sock feast, he told the assembly that he wanted to give Rinpoche the title of Rime Choje, which meant unbiased Dharma Lord. He instructed that this was his formal title, while in general contexts he could be referred to as Khenpo. He also proclaimed to more than 400 monks in attendance that Rinpoche was indeed the reincarnation of Gyatso Khentrul Jigme Changchuk Gyatso, and that he should be honoured as such. To mark the occasion, Lama Lutrin presented Rinpoche with a number of very special texts from his personal collection, as well as his own ceremonial hat that he had worn during every teaching he had given. Receiving the title, the confirmation as a reincarnated Lama, and this symbolic gesture from his master, Rinpoche was empowered as a lineage holder and spiritual heir to Lama Lobsang Trinley. All of this was very surprising to Rinpoche, who felt quite embarrassed to be suddenly thrust into the spotlight after living as a simple monk for so long. He had never discussed his family secrets with Lama Lutrin, so it was even more astonishing to find his Lama saying all of these things in public. Rinpoche would later learn that Lama Lobsang Trinley had privately conducted an investigation to know more about Rinpoche's past lives, since he was obviously a very spiritual individual. To this end, he had gone to many high lamas and requested they identify who Rinpoche had been. The high lamas confirmed that Rinpoche was the second incarnation of the great Kalachakra adept known as the Washul Lama, Nawang Chosen Gyatso. This extraordinary practitioner was known for his phenomenal realizations and was a teacher to Lama Lutrin's own root guru, Nawang Tempa Rabgi, and other great masters such as Bamda Tubten Gelek Gyatso. It was Nawang Chosen Gyatso who then reincarnated as Getsi Khentrul, who was subsequently born as Khentrul Rinpoche Jamphel Lodrö. Meditating in the wilderness. Later that year, Rinpoche went to visit one of Lama Lutrin's most accomplished students, Yak Herder, who was in lifelong meditation retreat. When the two met, Yak told Rinpoche that he had experienced a very auspicious dream the night before his arrival, and then the two proceeded to have a very long and intense discussion about the Dharma that lasted well into the early hours of the morning. Feeling extremely inspired by his visit with this most special of yogis, Rinpoche travelled to Zamtang Sangwa Monastery to spend some time with friends. While there, he was invited by the abbot of Zamtang, Lama Yonten Zangpo, to come to his room. Presenting Rinpoche with a ceremonial scarf and several gifts, Yonten Zangpo told Rinpoche that he was to stay in Zamtang and teach the monks. While Rinpoche had no desire to teach, he accepted the position out of respect for Lama Yonten Zangpo, who had bestowed on him the Kalachakra empowerments. With the blessing of Lama Lutrin, Rinpoche began teaching at Zamtang, but quickly discovered that the situation was not going to work. Being in a position of leadership in such a large monastery meant that there was a great degree of politics involved. It became clear that if Rinpoche wanted to maintain the purity of his practice, he would need to leave. So with a sincere letter of apology, he renounced his position and chose to follow in the footsteps of yogis like Yak Herder and enter into solitary retreat in the wilderness of Tibet. Taking only a rolled-up mattress, some blankets, and the most essential of belongings, Rinpoche travelled to the forest of Dui Aranak, where great masters such as Patrul Rinpoche had meditated. Begging for food in the local villages, Rinpoche gathered enough supplies to last for 7 weeks. He then went into the forest and found a clearing where he made his camp. Filled with contentment and serenity, Rinpoche dedicated himself to meditation. At the end of the 7th week, as Rinpoche's supplies were running out, he received a visit from 2 children dressed in strange clothing. He hadn't seen a single human being in all the time he'd been there, so was quite surprised to see these children come out of nowhere. After welcoming them, Rinpoche told them that he was planning on leaving soon to go and get more supplies for his retreat. The 2 children warned him against this and told him that he should instead return home to see his family. They repeated this many times, and eventually Rinpoche agreed, and then they walked away. A few days later, after further consideration, Rinpoche chose to heed the advice of the 2 children and to return home. On the way, he stopped in a forest to spend the night. After falling asleep, Rinpoche dreamt of the same boy and girl who identified themselves as Dumchen and Ekajati, the two Dharma protectors often associated with the Dzogchen teachings. The two explained to him that he did not need to continue his forest retreat, and that instead he needed to apply his spiritual experience to wherever he found himself. Waking from his dream, Rinpoche was determined to take his life in a new direction. Travelling to the west. Upon arriving back in his village, it didn't take long for the community to start requesting Rinpoche to perform many tantric rituals for their benefit. After 2 weeks of rituals, Rinpoche began to feel a strong desire to see his Lama. He could feel that something important was happening, and so decided to set out for Chutang Monastery immediately. When he arrived, he found the monks performing a puja for Lama Lobsang Trinley. In public, Rinpoche was told that Lama was fine, but then in private, he discovered that Lama had passed into nirvana just a few days earlier. This fact was being kept secret in order to give Lama the privacy he needed to perform his meditation on death, which lasted for 5 days. The death of his precious teacher left a deep impact on Rinpoche. Even though Lama had warned his students that he would die that year, the sense of loss that he felt at that time was indescribable. After participating in all of the extensive pujas and practices that accompany the passing of a great Lama, Rinpoche made a solemn vow to give up all worldly concerns for 7 years. During that period, he would not visit his beloved family, nor involve himself in the matters of his home region. In order to fulfill his promise, Rinpoche knew that he would need to create some distance from the world that he had known up to this point. It was then that the idea arose in his mind to travel outside of Tibet. He developed the aspiration to visit foreign lands, going beyond what was familiar and exploring what was possible. Due to the ripening of this aspiration, Rinpoche was eventually able to gather all of the causes and conditions to be able to relocate himself to Melbourne, Australia. When he arrived, he enrolled himself in an English class to help him learn to communicate. While this world was drastically different from what he had grown up with, he was always determined and never gave up. For the next few years, Rinpoche would stay in a number of places around the city as he worked to develop his language skills and build connections within the local Buddhist community. Beginning to teach Westerners. By the start of 2005, Rinpoche received word that his mother had fallen ill and was in need of an operation. Wishing to help her, he sent out a request within the Buddhist community for donations to pay for her operation. As a result of this request, Rinpoche met Julie O'Donnell, who would go on to become one of Rinpoche's closest Western students. Julie invited Rinpoche to give teachings from her home in Upwey, an eastern suburb of Melbourne. Once a week, they would host teachings in her home, and then on the weekend he would travel to different places in the city to give public Dharma talks. Even though his English was still quite limited, he used these events to improve his communication skills and to help lay the foundations of a Dharma community. As a result of their efforts, under the guidance of Rinpoche, Julie established the Tibetan Buddhist Rime Institute as a not-for-profit organisation that would support the realisation of Rinpoche's projects. Around this time, they moved into a new home in the nearby suburb of Rowville that would allow them to expand their activities. From the Rowville house, Rinpoche continued to give weekly teachings on the fundamentals of Tibetan Buddhism, and also began to offer practice retreats for a growing number of students. At the same time, he became very active within the community, offering many public talks on the subjects of happiness and meditation. He would also perform blessing ceremonies and funeral rites for those who requested them. During this period, Rinpoche worked with Julie and other volunteers to compile his life stories and collect his teachings. From this material, they produced the first edition of the autobiography entitled A Secret Reincarnation, and new polished version of his Rime book called The Path of Pure Vision. Returning to Tibet. 7 years after Rinpoche had made his promise to his precious guru, Lama Lobsang Trinley, Rinpoche had finally created the conditions to return to Tibet and reconnect with his family. Due to the kindness of the donations that Rinpoche had received from his Western students, he had raised enough money not only to pay for his mother's operation, but also to travel to Tibet to see her in person. Accompanied by a small group of Western students, Rinpoche packed many suitcases worth of gifts and supplies for his aging mother, his relatives, and the people of his village. As they travelled towards Golok, they were greeted by throngs of monks who had come from all over the land to welcome him home and offer him white scarves. In the middle of a mountain clearing, they had set up a tent filled with food. Together, Rinpoche enjoyed a great feast with friends he had not seen since he left Tibet. Continuing on his journey home, the roads came to an end, and Rinpoche's party were forced to transfer all of their luggage and supplies onto 40 yaks arranged in a great caravan. Rinpoche was given a white horse decorated in flags, which he rode at the head of the long procession. Slowly they made their way through the mountainous passes and beautiful summer valleys of Rinpoche's childhood home. As they approached their destination, everyone in the village and the surrounding region had come out to greet Rinpoche. They stood in a long line leading back to his home. Each person held an offering scarf and cheered as Rinpoche rode past. The sound of Tibetan horns and drums could be heard echoing through the mountains, heralding Rinpoche's arrival. When he finally approached his mother's house, Rinpoche was filled with joy and immediately went to his mother, touching his head to hers, as is the custom in Tibet. The two remained in this way for many minutes, as if they never wanted to part again. With tears welling up in their eyes, they eventually went inside to talk and to celebrate his return. This beautiful reunion would prove to be the last time that Rinpoche would see his mother alive, as she passed away the following year. Following his time with his mother, Rinpoche and his Western students set out for Chutang Monastery, visiting various monasteries on the way, including Jamphel Monastery and Zamtam Sangwa. Similar to his reception in Golok, hundreds of monks lined the streets to welcome Rinpoche and honour him. Since that time, Rinpoche has led more than 6 tours to eastern Tibet. Not only do these trips allow him to introduce his Western students to the rich spiritual heritage that still flourishes in the region, but they also help him to maintain strong connections with the many great practitioners who live there. Through these connections, Rinpoche hopes to bring the blessings of the lineage into the world. Founding Zongzuk Deshen Ling. Upon returning to Australia, it became clear to Rinpoche that in order to help his fledgling community continue to grow, the Rime Institute needed a permanent location that they could call home. For this purpose, he began to look for a property that could function as the basis for a future Dharma centre. After an exhaustive search, he eventually found a beautiful house located in the small town of Belgrave, nestled in the vibrant forests of the Dandenong Ranges to the east of Melbourne. After moving in, Rinpoche set to work with a team of volunteers to renovate the house and build a temple where students could receive teachings and practice meditation. While Rinpoche continued to lead weekly classes and retreats in the upper part of the house, the basement was slowly transformed into a beautiful space for spiritual practice that was filled with extraordinary blessings. When the construction process was complete, Rinpoche celebrated their achievement by giving the centre the name of Tongzuk Deshen Ling, which means place of empty form and great bliss. As the members of the community continued to study under Rinpoche's skillful guidance, Rinpoche himself was focused primarily on creating study materials for his students. Recognizing that there were very few resources available for Westerners who were interested in practicing the Kalachakra path, he set out to communicate his vast knowledge in the form of a series of books. One of the first books to be produced at Tongzuk Deshen Ling was Hidden Treasure of the Profound Path, a word-by-word commentary of the Divine Ladder that he originally wrote in Tibetan and then had translated into English and Chinese. Then, in close collaboration with a series of volunteers, Rinpoche produced a book called A Happier Life, which focused on practical advice for achieving genuine happiness. At the same time, he continued to give shape to his primary text, Unveiling Your Sacred Truth, a massive compilation of teachings detailing the complete path, written in a step-by-step manner to facilitate the gradual development of his students. Propagating the Kalachakra teachings. In the summary of 2014, after many years of sustained efforts introducing the Kalachakra Dharma to Western students, Rinpoche met a Canadian man named Joe Flumerfelt, who soon moved to Melbourne in order to work with Rinpoche. Together, the two focused on expanding the materials Rinpoche had already established in order to fully actualize his vision. As a result of their collaboration, they produced two original books. The first, called Ocean of Diversity, expanded upon Rinpoche's existing Rime book to include all of the world's major wisdom traditions and his teachings on how to develop a Rime philosophy. The second, called Demystifying Shambhala, expanded upon a small book he had written detailing the history of the Jonang tradition in Tibet. This book also included Rinpoche's detailed explanation of the relationship between Shambhala and Kalachakra. In addition to these works, the material presented in Unveiling Your Sacred Truth was restructured and expanded significantly, producing a 3-volume set. While these new additions to his collected works were being produced, Rinpoche was invited to give teachings in a variety of cities around the world. In his first world tour, Rinpoche visited many European countries, such as Romania, Hungary, Austria, Italy, and Greece. He then continued to the United States, where he planted the seeds of Dharma in the American Midwest. The following year, Rinpoche returned to many of these countries in order to continue guiding a growing number of dedicated students. It was also at this time that Rinpoche began to give a condensed version of the Kalachakra empowerments as part of his teachings. By 2017, Rinpoche had successfully laid the groundwork for a global network of Kalachakra practitioners, with practice groups started in a handful of cities. Through various large events, Rinpoche was given the opportunity to present many of his new books and also to develop a large number of meaningful Dharma connections with people from all over the world. Since that time, Rinpoche has continued to teach in more than 20 countries, tirelessly introducing people to the teachings of Kalachakra and showing them how to practice. Manifesting the Golden Age of Peace and Harmony. In 2018, Khentrul Rinpoche established Dzokden, an international network of individuals, practice groups, training institutes, and retreat centres. His mission is to generate the causes for global peace and harmony by practicing in accordance with the teachings of the Kalachakra Tantra. While Dzogden embraces the vast diversity of wisdom traditions in this world, it specializes in the profound path of Vajra Yoga, the unique teachings of the Kalachakra completion stage, as taught in the Jonang Shambhala tradition. Through Dzogden, Khentrul Rinpoche envisions a world without limitations, a world where each of us has the capacity to discover our infinite potential, and where, regardless of the society we belong to or the traditions we follow, individuals can come together as a single global family, united in our perfect nature. In such a world, free from all forms of bias, our minds will abide in complete peace and harmony, giving rise to a prosperous planet in perfect balance where spirituality flourishes.